It's your Thursday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope you guys are having a good day out there as well. Really good show coming up. Marcus Fuller from the Star Tribune joins me here in just a few minutes to talk Gopher basketball. Big game against Ohio State tonight at Williams Arena. One the Gophers probably need to win as they kind of keep the discussion about are they an NCAA tournament team alive. 7-7 in the Big Ten right now, but as Marcus explains, it's not just about where they finish in the Big Ten this year, how many wins they get. It's about quality wins. It's about how the Big Ten this year is not what it used to be. So there is a lot of work for them to do to get into the conversation as an NCAA tournament team. But they have an opportunity. They have a case to make, and winning a game tonight, winning this weekend at Nebraska, those would be two big things to help solidify their resume, get them on that path. But Marcus and I will talk more about that. We'll get into some interesting developments over the course of this year with their lineup, things like that, and talk about the best dunkers in high school, which Marcus just wrote about earlier this week. So check that out here in just a few minutes. Got a fun way to get into the Kirk Cousins discussion that I'll get to at the end of the show. And I've got Velle E. Neal's column today on Gophers baseball and softball getting kicked out of U.S. Bank Stadium and some interesting wrinkles for 2025 that I did not know about. I learned from his column. We'll get to that here in just a minute before Marcus Fuller. First, though, what did I miss? Let's start with the Twins because Bobby Nightingale reported off of a radio interview that Joe Pohlad gave earlier this week that the Twins are not really in the market right now for any of the expensive free agents that are out there. Velle and I talked about some of these guys that are still sitting out there, Cody Bellinger, Jordan Montgomery, guys that are sitting out on the market right now that might be able to help the Twins, but that nobody's really, nobody's signed yet. 4 of the top 10 free agents in baseball still out there on the market. Well, Joe Pohlad has heard the chatter, has heard Twins fans saying, hey, look, your payroll is about $30 or $35 million less right now than it was last year. In fact, I think Bobby reported it's around $120 million right now. Last year was about $156. That's $36 million less. Why not go out and get one of these guys? Blake Snell, Matt Chapman, one of these guys. And Joe Pohlad goes on WCCO radio early this week and says, the reason I say no, so he's saying no, we're not interested in any of those guys right now. The reason I say no is just because we're going to live pretty much where we're at right now. What I will say about some flexibility is when Derek Falvey and his team think there's the right opportunity in front of us, we don't live hard and fast by a specific number. That said, we're not going to go out and spend $30 million on a player right now. The players that are out there right now that probably a bunch of fans are talking about, we are not in the market for those players, but there are definitely other players that can have a positive impact on our team that Derek, I'm sure, is looking at. So, erase this idea from your memory. The Twins are not going to go out and get one of these expensive stars. My question is, why? Maybe why aren't they taking another look at this? Because you look at what happened last season. I would understand this mindset 100% if I didn't think this Twins team, what they're building, had the chance to be something special, right? Like they won a playoff series last year. They were a division winner. They have some young, exciting talent. They might be a player or two away from being a legitimate playoff contender. So this feels like a time where I feel like they could make a move that would have a serious impact on their ability to not just win the AL Central again, but could impact their ability to compete in the playoffs. So why rule this out? Why say no to this right off the bat? Why would you put yourself in that spot? I guess is what I'm saying. Why would you just come out and say, no, we're not interested in these guys? Be open to that opportunity. Be open to excellence. I get that payroll was kind of high last year. I get that the TV stuff is affecting things. The TV stuff is not affecting things to the tune of $36 million, though. They made almost $55 million from local TV last year from their deal with Diamond Sports. I guarantee you the gap this year is not $36 million. My guess is that it's probably closer to $10, $15 million. But we don't know that. We don't know the number because they won't tell us the number. They don't want us to know the number that they are making off of TV right now this year. And that is a problem to me, too. So there's going to be some future implications of the TV deal. They probably don't want to get locked into a long-term deal with another expensive player. They've already got Carlos Correa on the payroll, making $30 million, more than $30 million, taking up about a quarter of the payroll right now. They've got Byron Buxton making big money, Pablo Lopez. They've got some big money players on the roster right now. So I get, maybe one of these guys doesn't necessarily fit, but why rule that out? Why say we're not trying to put the best team out there that we can? Why limit yourself at this point in the game? I don't get that. Now, the fan reaction is pretty typical, calling the Pohlad cheap. Some of them saying, hey, I don't like it, but I do appreciate the honesty. And I think Joe Pohlad's words were good. I appreciate him saying it to a certain degree. If this is how he feels, I'm glad that he said it with such clarity. I don't necessarily agree with the message. I'm not saying I don't like the way he said it. I'm just saying I don't love the message right now that he's trying to send, because this is a team, like I said, that could be on the verge of something really good. Now, all of this can kind of be washed away if they make a couple of decent moves before the start of the season and evaluate where things are at May, June, trade deadline into July, where they're getting. What does this team look like? What are they missing? Are they a starting pitcher away? Then you can go out and get someone, pay them for a couple months, not 6 months, that might make a little bit more sense on this payroll that you're trying to, bring down from last year's $156 million. So I will be more on board with this if I see evidence of additions as the rest of this spring and specifically at the trade deadline. If they make more moves at that point, then I can say, okay, you know what, I see the plan. I see where they were going with this. You didn't necessarily need to add someone in February that was a big ticket guy, because you could get to the point you needed to get to, reevaluate, and then kind of make your signature move. I get that. But if there's nothing else coming, if you're just kind of like treading water and thinking you're going to be just as good or better this year than last year, minus Sonny Gray, minus Kenta Maeda, minus Jorge Polanco, I know some of these younger guys should take another step forward. I know you like the potential of a Byron Buxton bounce back, a Carlos Correa bounce back, Royce Lewis being healthy all year. Those are all good things you have going for you. I'm just saying, this team is on the verge. It feels like they're on the verge of being good. You don't want to hamstring yourself with a long-term contract. I get that, but don't close yourself off from excellence just to maintain being good for a long time. Speaking of being annoyed, good Velle E. Neal column today in the Star Tribune, StarTribune.com, about Gopher baseball and softball, as well as like small college area softball and baseball. We already knew that US Bank Stadium was not available for baseball and softball this spring because they're replacing the turf. I get that. We know that. It's forcing the Gopher baseball team and softball team on the road for much of February, March. They're not going to be able to open at home till early April. This year they probably could play earlier, but you never know that when you're making the schedule. So that much we knew. That's unfortunate. If it happens once every blue moon, that's okay. Lavelle's column was interesting because he's talking to John Anderson and some of these other folks. John Anderson, the retiring Gopher baseball coach, they are worried that this is going to become more of the norm. Not that they're going to replace the turf every year, but Lavelle writes there are rumblings that the typical 6-week window that US Bank Stadium is open for baseball and softball, which I imagine is typically like mid-February to late March before teams can get outside, but after the football season is over, he said there are rumblings that the typical 6-week window could be cut down by 2/3 in 2025 so that the US Bank Stadium can host a bigger event, writing about how ASM Global, which manages things, and the Sports Commission, they're looking for the Facilities Authority, looking for bigger revenue things, looking for things that could fill the building in those kind of late winter months that would be more lucrative than baseball and softball. And that'd be a shame. I don't like this idea at all. Like I get that you're trying to make money off this, but this was dubbed the People's Stadium. We always come back to that. Mark Dayton had this vision. This was the People's Stadium. This should be used. There was a clause, there was talk of this should, outfitted for baseball and softball, able to play in there, just like the Dome was back in the day. Like when you tore the Dome down, you should be able to have this place in the winter. Can't play baseball and softball in the winter here in January, February, and March. You should be able to configure it for this during this time. If that goes away, that feels like a slap in the face to baseball and softball. I thought Lavelle's column was really good. He really kind of laid out the issue and responds with, the future better include baseball and softball people in the People's Stadium. I agree 100%. I'll be watching this. I think everybody else should too, that this should be used for what it was intended to be used for and not just to make more money during that short window of time.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino. Let your story begin.
Let's talk Gopher basketball today with Marcus Fuller from the Star Tribune. A lot of interest in this team all of a sudden, Marcus. 7-7 in the Big Ten. An opportunity to at least get in the conversation for the NCAA tournament, depending on how these next 6 regular season games and the Big Ten tournament go. I want to get into that with you, as well as obviously the upcoming game Thursday against Ohio State, and maybe a little bit about the Young Dunkers thing you wrote in your Basketball Across Minnesota column. But first off, how you doing?
Pretty good, yeah. This is the first time we've done this podcast in the Williams Arena media room, so I like that. Right on the job, as opposed to being at home, even though I do work from home a lot.
Right.
Yeah, so I appreciate again, as always, being on the podcast. Go for Hoops seems like it's a hot ticket right now. Maybe not as hot as the Timberwolves, but they're trying. Maybe not as hot as Clayton Clark when she comes to town, but
Yes.
Ben Johnson and his program, they are interesting. You talked about the NCAA tournament. Obviously this is at the point of the season, and it's getting to be late February here, where if you are moving in the right direction with your team, you do want to move in the direction of getting those NCAA tournament quality wins. They don't necessarily have a lot of those on their schedule. You can talk about quad 1 this and quad 2 that. The fact of the matter is they only have one real signature win, and that's versus Michigan State at home. And then you have Iowa, who's in the mix for an NCAA tournament, just like the Gophers are, maybe a little ahead of them. And then they beat Michigan State on the road. So, if you're throwing these teams into a hat, and you don't know who's who, Iowa and Minnesota in the same hat, and they have beaten Michigan State on the road and you beat them at home, who are you going to pick? And those are their 2 best wins right now, each team. So I think, if you look at what the Gophers have yet on their schedule, I don't necessarily want to look past Ohio State, who they have Thursday, but if you do, you're looking at Nebraska this weekend. You're looking at Illinois, Northwestern, all those road games. Those are all opportunities for them to pick up more signature wins, and each one of those wins would be greater than the one they had at Michigan State at home. But that was definitely a step in the right direction, because it gave confidence to this team that they can be a team that right now is an NCAA tournament team.
Is there a magic number you feel like they need to get to in terms of wins? Does it matter? The quality obviously matters. You're right. They've got those 3 quad 1 games on the road still left. You got to take care of business in the games you're supposed to win. And I would say this Ohio State game, even though the Buckeyes just changed coaches, they had a major upset against Purdue right after that. This is still a game the Gophers should win, or need to win, at least to keep that conversation and momentum going. But is it, you got 6 regular season games left. You'd like to think you would need to do some things in the Big Ten tournament as well. Is there, what's the path? Like, what's the least they can do, you think, that gets them, if not for sure in kind of onto that bubble talk?
Yeah, I'm not a bracketologist, but
No.
I've been doing it long enough where probably could fill up my own bracket. But this is a down year in the Big Ten. I mean, there's no way around it. They can't help that. And this is a year where they have the worst non-conference schedule out of any Big Ten team, and according to Ken Palm, in the country. So that's going to knock against them. There's no going back. You can't change your non-conference schedule and go, hey, let's schedule Kentucky or something. That just won't happen. Even if they would have scheduled St. Thomas, it probably would have helped their non-conference schedule better. But if you look at what they have moving forward, really it's not about, some people say, hey, what if they finish 4th place in the Big Ten? That'll help you with seeding in the Big Ten tournament. You get a double bye, and then you get to play your first game against a really good opponent that'll be a quad 1 win. So that's what place matters. Placing they don't care about that. The NCAA selection committee does not care about where you finish place-wise in the Big Ten. They don't necessarily care about even your number of overall wins. People say, oh, you get to 20 wins, you'll make it. No, that doesn't matter anymore. It matters completely about the quality of your wins, and how bad your losses are. So, and then obviously, the way you're playing at the end of the season matters, even if not necessarily have a lot of great opponents at the end of the year. If you have momentum, they'll recognize that. So I think that all they got to do is just keep stacking wins. Like you said, you got to win the ones that you're supposed to win at home. They play Ohio State. They Penn State and Indiana. All those three games are against non-NCAA tournament teams right now. Definitely Indiana and Penn State are not in that mix. But I would say that, Ohio State's a team that you lost to on the road. You want to get them back at home, and they're playing well. I mean, they just beat Purdue. So eye test wise, Ohio State definitely would help them. You have 2 wins in a row, and then you win at Nebraska. That's another 3-game win streak, which they had another one earlier this month. And that gives them some momentum, to the NCAA tournament committee that say this team is playing their best basketball right now. There's not a computer that's going to pick the NCAA tournament. It's the committee, and they're human. They see a team that's hot. They see a team that has a freshman that might be Big Ten freshman of the year, a really good all Big Ten type of player in Dawson Garcia, a really good point guard that leads the nation assists. And then they're going into the Big Ten tournament at home in Minneapolis, where, again, if you have a higher seed, you're going to end up with a couple wins being able to play in the semifinals or the championship game. And if you have that momentum at the end of the year, you have a few quality wins. Yes, you have a poor non-conference schedule, but if I'm on the committee and I see this team has momentum, I see them playing well at the end of the Big Ten season and then playing well at home in Minneapolis at the tournament, I'm saying this looks like an NCAA tournament team. So that would help them.
Computers won't tell all of it. Obviously, like you said, there's eye test, there's kind of how you're playing at the end of the year. That said, the net rating does factor into things, or at least gives us a good idea. Their net rating is kind of in the mid-70s right now, which is an improvement over where it's been. Keeps getting better the further they get from that non-conference season. Is there like a place where they kind of want to get to or need to get to where teams feel safer, even if we know this isn't the only criteria that's going to be used?
Yeah, don't quote me on this, but I believe that the highest team to make the NCAA tournament as far as net was around the mid-70s.
So kind of right where they are right now.
Yes. But that team had, I believe, 5 quad 1 wins, something like that. So, they had a lot of opportunities to win, and they did, and so I think that got them in. It's just the amount of, quality victories, and they were playing well at the end of the year. So, again, there's nothing they can do about the non-conference schedule. That's what's dragging their net rating down. There's nothing they can do about the Big Ten being down this year, where you have a lot of teams with high net ratings. Indiana, not a very good team this year. Penn State, Northwestern is better, but obviously Northwestern is not a ranked team. Purdue is number 2 in the country, and they're really just carrying the Big Ten right now. Illinois is a decent team, but Wisconsin, at one point they were a top 10 team, even when they played the Gophers at home. Now they're not even ranked, and so a lot of these teams, again, they would have been better a year ago in net rating, and now you have a lot of teams that are just dragging the net rating down, even by playing them, and then especially if you lose to an Ohio State, to an Indiana or Penn State, that would take you completely out of the mix, in my opinion, realistically, unless you make a run in the Big Ten tournament.
Our colleague Patrick Royce was of the opinion that aside from the kind of 2 or 3 minute stretch where they let Rutgers kind of scare them the other day, that was one of the better, if not the best, Gophers performance he's seen this year. Do you agree with that? How good were they, and why do you think they looked so good in that game, if indeed that's your opinion?
I don't necessarily agree with that. I saw them play better at Iowa. When they were up 20 at Iowa and it was Super Bowl Sunday, I was like ready to pop the champagne and get ready for the Super Bowl party. It seemed like this was going to be the win that really turned them the corner toward making the NCAA tournament, because that would have been a for sure quad 1 win, and their best win by far yet. You look what Iowa did at Michigan State. So then again, if you would have beaten Iowa at home, at Iowa, and then Iowa goes and beats Michigan State on the road, it would even help you even more. So, There was a stretch there versus Iowa where Dawson Garcia was amazing. He had 18 points in the first half. They had shot 11 for 15 from three to start that game. I mean, it was unbelievable. And this was an Iowa team that, one of the highest scoring teams in the Big Ten, and they held them to 38 points at halftime. So they're not only doing it on offense, but they're doing it on defense. And then all of a sudden Garcia gets hurt, and then the rest is history. There was a stretch versus Purdue as well, where they're shooting the lights out of the ball, 9 threes in the first half. And they held Zach Edey in check, who, again, is the best player in the country. So those two stretches, in my opinion, were the best that they had played this year. I think this was the best I've seen them play defensively in a half. Rutgers is not a juggernaut scoring, but, they did do the damage versus Gophers in the first half. Cliff Omoruyi was getting anything he wanted. They've got guards that can, they can score at the rim. And so, they were shooting the ball very well in the first half, Rutgers was, and then they shot 25%. I mean, they literally just cut their field goal percentage in half in the second half. And that was even with them making that run, right? They were down 17, Rutgers was, and they came and cut it within 6. Can you imagine what the field goal percentage for Rutgers would have been if they just completely tanked and lost by 20? I mean, that would have been even more impressive defensive half for the Gophers.
Now, you wrote about their defense and just in the context of where they are right now. Like, what do you see? Is that in terms of strengths, weaknesses, things they've improved on as the season has gone along?
Well, again, this is a team that we're talking about this 500 in the Big Ten. So, it's not one-sided one way or the other. They're not, this team is the best defensive team in the Big Ten, or they're not the worst. I mean, they've really had a tale of two halves like the whole season. I mean, you look at Purdue, you look at Iowa, both those games, they really held two of the best offenses in check, including the best player in the country. And then all of a sudden it just goes haywire. Rutgers, it's a tale of two halves. Second half looked great on defense. First half, not so much. I think the theme I sense is that, their guards. I mean, when they play teams with bigger guards, it's a little tougher for Elijah Hawkins, Mike Mitchell Jr. to kind of handle some of those guys physically, and they need a little bit of help. Braden Carrington comes in there, and he's a defensive stopper. If he stays out of foul trouble, he can really shut down an opponent's best perimeter player. And that's what he did versus Rutgers. Jeremiah Williams had done a really good job in the Rutgers 4-game win streak of scoring the ball, but he was held in check. And then you look at a big guy like Cliff Omoruyi. He had everything he wanted in the first half, and then Pharrell Payne, really was physical with him, and Dawson Garcia was physical with him, and they shut him down in the second half. So I think it's a team effort. There's not one guy. I mean, Carrington's their best defender, but it can't always be on his shoulders. Talking to Ben Johnson going into Ohio State, they really have to do a good job of handling Jamison Battle, former Gopher, that really just lit him up in the second half in Columbus in their loss. He had 25 points, and Bruce Thornton, Buckeyes guard, got to the paint anytime he wanted off the dribble. So it's a challenge, I think, even more than the Rutgers game defensively for the Gophers, especially the way that Ohio State played versus Purdue. And I think, if they can continue to gain momentum on that side of the ball, that will translate to any game, whether it's home or away, whether they go through these long scoring droughts or not. They can still compete and possibly pull off a win that they need.
Promise I'm not trying to stir up any trouble or drama, but I can't help but notice, Marcus.
Don't ask me. I know what you're going to ask me.
Joshua Ola-Joseph, he's not playing as much as he was. These are just facts. I don't know if you know.
I'm not the coach. Why are you asking me?
I'd love to. I mean, I'll ask Ben if next time I see him. But so he was starting a lot of games, playing minutes in the low 20s to mid 20s for most of the year. Then plays 5 minutes in their loss to the Badgers. Was about a month ago. Plays 26 against Penn State because I think Pharrell Payne was out that game. Hasn't played double-digit minutes in the 5 games since. 9, 6, 6, 5, 5.
Yeah, and I know where you're going. I know where you're going with this. So let me just say this. Okay?
Yeah.
Josh Ola-Joseph is a very, very talented player.
Yeah.
Going into the season, he started 20-something games as a freshman, and then he started a bunch of games this year as a sophomore. I think there was a stretch there where he started 42 straight games. Okay. So Ben Johnson and his staff believe in Joshua Joseph. It's not about, all of a sudden, like, they don't believe in him and they can help this team. It's about trying to find the right chemistry between players. Okay. So,
Okay.
and the emergence of Pharrell Payne. There's a long time, I think even on one of these podcasts where we're talking about, why isn't Ben Johnson starting Pharrell Payne? Well, he is now, and all of a sudden, this is a even more formidable team in the front court. When they're facing some of these bigger, stronger opponents. Iowa was a big, strong, team inside. Purdue, Rutgers, very physical. And so it's about matchups. I think that Joshua Joseph is going to help them at some point. If they're going to make a run at the end of the year here, he's going to help them at some point. I think, he did help them in a couple spots in Rutgers and in the previous game. It's here and there now. It's not like 30 minutes a game or 25, whatever it's starting. So I think he's bought into it. He and Isaiah Enan, they're in a position where, for the most part, because they play a 3-guard starting lineup, they're going with, more ball handlers than they are, long, athletic type of guys like Josh and Isaiah at the 3. So that puts them out of the playing at the 3 in the small forward position. They're competing with Pharrell and Dawson for minutes, and that's just not going to happen. I mean, they're going to go with Pharrell and Dawson as long as they can. And then when they've played some of these bigger physical teams, they've thrown in Jack Wilson and Parker Fox to try to battle with these guys defensively. And it's even tougher for them, obviously. So I think it's just a matter of matchups. Ohio State's a little bit more athletic, and you might see, Ola Joseph get in there. They're not as tall, but they're athletic. I think you might see him get in there. But, again, I'm doing a story on defense. I think it's at any level, high school, youth basketball, college. If you want to play, go in there and play some defense. Show them you can play some defense, and then you'll probably see more playing time. But I don't think it's just a Joshua Joseph thing. Isaiah Enan, Parker Fox at times earlier in the year wasn't playing much, and all of a sudden he was a huge spark in games. And I ended up writing about him a couple of weeks ago going into Iowa. So it's just a matter of time. The most important thing is we're talking about a starter for a majority of the last 2 years not getting that many minutes now. All of a sudden, what does that mean? That means you have depth. Right. I mean, there's no way that this would happen a couple years ago or even last year. So that just means they have depth. And, at times they're going to need to tap into that depth.
I think that's fair. I mean, and you're right. They were desperate to field any kind of lineup these last 2 years, and to have the luxury of a guy's not hurt, he can still play, but they just see better options right now. You're right. That is the sign of the evolution of the program. It just was interesting to see the minutes cut so much, but you're right. Payne's playing more. The minutes got to come from somewhere. The minutes got to come from somewhere, right?
If they weren't winning, then all of a sudden you'd see different matchups or different lineups. Different lineup in there.
Royal Credit Union's Smart Checking accounts offer no monthly fees and no minimum balance. Enjoy financial freedom when you open your Royal Credit Union Smart Checking account online at rcu.org/go-checking. Insured by NCUA.
That is true. Well, let's shift gears really quick. You wrote about the best high school dunkers, best young dunkers in Minnesota. That was a lot of fun in your Basketball Across Minnesota feature. What sparked that idea? How much fun did you have doing that one?
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get much out of the NBA Slam Dunk contest, so I started to go on YouTube and say, hey, what can we hear? What can we find here in Minnesota that's better than that? And, we don't have Zach LaVine anymore. We don't have Rodney Williams in years past, but, Parker Fox is definitely a top dunker, but that's at the college level. What about younger, And so I did find there's plenty of clips on Daniel Freitag. He's a Minnesota Mr. Basketball candidate. Breck's doing a great job this year, pushing toward a state championship. And I think, he's an exciting player. I know, he's a Badger, and all the Gopher fans will be like, why are you writing about this guy? But he's definitely one of the better high school players in the state. And then he's an amazing dunker. And I wanted to know, does he have a rival? There's plenty of guys that he mentioned, but he talked about a Vinnie Cronin from Medina, who's a freshman. And I was like, really? A rival for you dunking is a freshman. Interesting. And they actually, battled in a dunk contest in St. Cloud in the summer. Vinny said he got the best of him. Free Tag ended up winning the contest. But he said, hey, Vinny's dunks were cooler than mine, So I just thought that was kind of neat, since we weren't that thrilled about the NBA dunk contest, that these two guys actually faced off and actually put on a show. And, again, when we see another dunk contest in the NBA that rivals, Levine versus Aaron Gordon, probably not. But, I think, these young dunkers keep, getting older. And at some point, we'll see the next great dunker in the NBA. And it might not be it might not be a Zach LaVine type from Minnesota, but they're coming. They're coming. I mean, they're coming younger and younger. I tell you that.
I can't even imagine being able to dunk at any point in my life, let alone as a freshman in high school. But that's pretty cool. And but the dunk contest. The dunk contest, by the way,
on the Nerf hoops, Mike. You had fun on the Nerf. You had fun on the Nerf hoops.
The Nerf hoops. I take my kids to the trampoline park and I dunk on the trampoline hoops. Those are fun. But my beef with the NBA dunk contest too is like the guy who won it is barely an NBA player. He's been in like 4 NBA games. Mac McClung. Exactly. Like what? Like he's a good dunker, but it's just it's what it is. What it is. It's fine. But yep, I'm glad you guys. I'm glad you shined a spotlight on some of these guys locally who are getting it done.
For sure. No, it's fun and. One of these days, you and I will go on the door frame hoop, and then we'll battle it out. We'll see what happens.
7 foot, 8 foot, something like that. We'll be all about that. All right, Marcus. Well, appreciate it. Follow Marcus's coverage from the Ohio State game Thursday night. He'll be in Nebraska as well over the weekend. Appreciate it, Marcus. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Good stuff from Marcus. We get obsessed about net rating, bracketology, bubble, who's in, who's out. Gophers aren't on any sort of bubble yet. They're way on the outside looking in, but those things will take care of themselves if they keep winning. The net rating will keep improving. They will start to show up on some of these bubble watches if they keep winning. The key to that is to win tonight against Ohio State. And if they can get a win at Nebraska this weekend, that will be a big resume builder. So we'll see where the rest of this season goes. The big picture is that, hey, we're talking about this as a potential NCAA tournament team where at the start of the year we were just wondering if they could win some games. They were picked last in the league again. They have exceeded that expectation, at least externally. I think their internal expectations were a little higher than external, but they have exceeded expectations to this point, and they can take them even higher with a good finish to this season. Let us finish with the cooler. Speaking of a good finish, talking about Kirk Cousins, there's lots of stuff out there. I think we're going to learn more pretty soon when the scouting combine happens in Indianapolis next week. That's usually where rumors and rumblings start to sort themselves out. The combine goes, until March 4th, and then really after that, there's barely a week until the new league year. And like we've talked about, the Vikings are going to have to make a decision on Cousins before the league year starts. Otherwise, all of that dead money from his contract hits the books this year. $28 million, something like that. So this will be resolved soon. I think the combine will be a place where we start to get more information on that. Until then, though, we have plenty of rumor, innuendo, and fun. One thing that caught my eye recently, The Ringer does this every year, kind of their quarterback commitment index. They ended with the Vikings and Kirk Cousins. They identify their relationship as "you don't want to be out here." Said the Vikings are a younger team that spent the past few years with an older man, but since Kirk Cousins RIP'd in October, well, he tore his Achilles, but in his mid-30s, it's probably the same thing. Minnesota can start looking for a younger man who fits its timeline. With an offensive core that includes receivers Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and a great offensive line, Minnesota's biological clock is ticking. How many generational Packers quarterbacks do Vikings fans have to see until they can upgrade from Cousins? Amen. Just a different way of saying what I'm thinking right now. It's time. It's time to move on. You can like Kirk Cousins. You can appreciate how good he's been. It is time to cut the cord. It is time to move on. It is time to get your quarterback of the future. Take your medicine this year. Take the dead money this year. Be okay this year. Be okay with it this year and start building for 2025 and beyond. Give yourself a chance to be a true Super Bowl contender into the future and not just a team that might win 8, 9, 10 games into perpetuity. That's what I say. That's what a lot of people are thinking right now, and we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks. That will do it for me today. Should be a good show coming up tomorrow. Expecting to talk plenty of Wolves with Chris Hine from the Star Tribune as the Wolves resume play after the break. Big game tomorrow night at Target Center against the Bucks. Until then, I am Michael Rand. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.